Welcome back after Christmas, everybody. I have a late Christmas present for each one of you. This has been purchased by the church for you. It is a daily devotional book that focuses specifically on modern evidence for the account of the Bible. There is a lot of modern evidence for the Bible, much more than we can cover even in 1 year's worth of confirmation classes. So this book has 1 year's worth of readings. Every reading is about a page. They're not particularly long. They do have pictures to break up the wall of text, and it's a good read. And it's meant to be read every day, just 1 page a day. And let me see. I have them. I wrote your names in them, and that they were presented to you by St. Paul's Lutheran Church. And I believe I stacked them alphabetically. So check for your name inside the front cover there.
This is awesome.
Yeah. So they're not from me.
Are you reading already?
It's a person. Like,
if you're reading, read about January 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. You said there's not work on already? No, today's the 3rd.
oh, it was like mine.
Elijah, you got one.
I know how daily devotion.
Hey, now, everybody has to learn at some point.
And for your information, I already know.
Don't be little people for not knowing a thing that you just happen to know already.
Oh, this is
I'll do
I
that.
know.
All right.
What is the little 1 Peter 3, chapter 3, verses 15?
That is a Bible reference that I would encourage you to read sometime. You should have memorized it, but I'll forgive you for not having retained. What's that? So, I actually have given you the reading assignment for your homework for tonight is taken from that book. I did photocopy the page so you don't have to open the book. I did that mostly for the sake of apparently Elijah and Caleb, who aren't here to get the book, but I had a feeling somebody wouldn't have the book, and it felt wrong to give an assignment from a book that you don't have. So even though most of you have it, I went and copied it. But I would strongly encourage you to read. They're just little bite-sized things, probably less than 5 minutes of reading, depending on how fast you are, once a day. And yeah, it's good stuff. We're on page 71 in your workbook today. I don't know how long it's going to take us to finish lesson 17, but it's very different than lesson 18. And so I don't really want to try to start a new lesson that completely shifts gears from where we're at, especially since where we're at is already kind of stale because we didn't meet last week. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the material, the rest of lesson 17 on page 71, again, is where we're picking up. And then, if there's any time left, we'll play a game of Stump the Pastor. Stump the Pastor is a game that I invented one time when I wasn't prepared for confirmation class. And basically it means that we'll have just some unstructured time where you can ask me any tough questions, anything's on the table. If it's too personal, I might decline to answer, but otherwise I'll be honest. And yeah, you've got the ear of the pastor and the brain of the pastor, for what that's worth, at your disposal after we get through the assigned stuff for today. So this lesson 17 is really focusing on the flood, Noah's flood. It is an absolutely massive event in Earth's history, for which there are literal mountains of evidence. I say literal mountains because if you recall last week, I drew that illustration on the board of the tectonic plates sliding as the volcanoes erupt. Oh yeah, you can still kind of see it a little bit there. And where the tectonic plates collided, they bent up into mountains, literal mountains. To be fair, the Bible doesn't say that happened. This is scientific conjecture, if you will, educated guessing. We know how Earth works when it crashes into each other. Tectonic plates crash into each other. We know there was this gigantic flood, and we know there's all these mountains. And we talked at length about how the rock layers in those mountains are also bent, and that would be a pretty strong indicator that they were all soft at the same time at the time when they were bent. And that goes against the prevailing long Earth evolutionary theory, which says that those rock layers that we see all around the world were deposited very, very slowly across millions and even billions of years. Because if that were the case, then they would be too rigid, and whenever the earth bent upward for whatever reason to make the mountains, the rigid layers of rock would have cracked. And there is absolutely no evidence of cracking in these layers. They were obviously soft when they rose up. The best that the evolutionary scientists can do is say that they must have been very hot, but there's no reason to think that they were very hot. They're not in volcanic regions. They're not, there's no source of heat. And this is not like, very hot sunlight. This is like borderline melting temperatures. So they're saying that these sedimentary rocks, which have no evidence, by the way, of having melted, because that's a thing, rocks can melt, and then they're bendable, but then they don't form these nice layers, and some of the sedimentary rocks would have metamorphosized into a different kind of rock. If you remember from earth science class, you've got your metamorphic rocks, your sedimentary rocks, and your igneous rocks are the ones made from cooled magma, cooled lava. All that said, the creationist explanation for these things is that they were all laid down together in the flood. There was this big washing of water and, lots of mud and dirt and everything was thrown all around. And then as things settled down, the heavy stuff fell to the bottom, the lighter stuff went on top. So it did kind of sort itself into layers as it all settled. And then the water flowed away to wherever it went, and the layers dried out and hardened with time. And before they dried out and hardened with time, that is when the tectonic upheaval happened that produced the mountains. And so those layers, since they were basically just layers of mud, they were like, all right, I guess we're going to bend. And that's that. That's what we talked about last week. Today, we're just going to pick up in the middle of page 71 on that bit with aquatic fossils there. Fossilized shark teeth are regularly found in Wyoming. Are there many sharks in Wyoming?
Nope.
There are not. Wyoming is a landlocked state. It's very landlocked. I don't even think any of its neighbors touch the ocean. So it's a very landlocked state. And yet there's shark teeth regularly found in Wyoming, not to mention shells and other aquatic fossils appearing on the Himalaya mountains in Nepal. The Himalayas are the tallest mountains in the world. Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world, is part of the Himalayan mountain range. So these are not just these are not just landlocked areas. These are like landlocked and also 20,000 feet up in the air, or however high Mount Everest is. I didn't look that one up.
42,000-ish.
42,000-ish. Very good. Yeah, that's what the journal article says. 42,000-ish. Thank you. No, that was a joke. Sorry, I'll try to be more obvious when I'm joking. So the question is, how did they get there? These are shells like clams and stuff, or shark teeth from, fish. So how did they get on top of these mountains? Well, the mountains must have been underwater. And the evolutionists have their own explanation that the tectonic plates are always moving for some reason. Although I did read recently that the flow of magma throughout the Earth's mantle is not strong enough to be moving the tectonic plates around. But I haven't looked that up, so maybe read up on that more before you go citing it like it's a fact. We don't need to be spreading misinformation. We have enough people accusing us of doing that. We don't need to be actually doing that. But anyway, they have their explanation of how at some point every surface of the Earth was underwater, at some time in history. But it makes perfect sense from our point of view that the global flood that covered everything with water would also then leave behind fossils of stuff that was rapidly buried at high elevations. Fossil beds is the next one. Massive fossil graveyards with mixtures of animal species exist in North America, Siberia, and other places around the world. Massive coal beds made from compressed plants and animals are found around the world. Now, some of these I don't really like that they just kind of say that, and how was that evidence for the flood? So I'll tell you, Do you remember how Stacy Lung talked about the flood when she was here as our guest speaker like a couple months ago?
Yeah.
So she mentioned something that I had never really thought about before, which is that even before the flood, the earth was a hilly place, you know? And so if you had a coastline, say here, and and the water begins to rise, the water did not rise that quickly. I mean, it rose on geological time, it rose extremely quickly because the water never goes that high. But it probably took months, if not at least weeks, for the water to slowly rise, the ocean water level to slowly rise over time. And as it did so, I didn't draw my mountains hilly enough, but as it did so, it would have driven the creatures living on the land upward. I guess I always, in my mind, in my imagination, I always envisioned that the whole world was just like, you know, it was like a giant tidal wave that just whoosh, washed everything out. And certainly there were places where that sort of thing happened, but for the majority of the world, it wasn't like that. It wouldn't have been like that. It would have just been that the ocean started going up, you know, and maybe got a bit wavier or whatever, but, you know, none of the giant whoosh, just the ocean would go up. And, you know, if you imagine these hills are like, you know, hundreds of miles apart or whatever, you would have a bunch of animals and people all on top of this hill trying to seek shelter. And, I don't know, that's a guy and his three-legged dog. And so you have people not seeking shelter, but seeking high ground, and they would get stranded there. And so they might maybe, you know, try to get where they know there is higher ground, but some of them wouldn't make it because they're not very good swimmers or whatever. And you would end up with these fossil graveyards in the low places, or maybe even the high places. I admit I haven't thought this like all the way through, because of course ultimately whatever the highest local place is going to be where all of the people and animals gather. And then when that goes under, well, the strongest swimmer lasts the longest, but then none of them last that long. And so what ends up happening then is that you get these massive graveyards of a huge and various mixture of people and animals. And, you know, we don't live among wild animals, so we don't recognize how strange this is, that these fossil graveyards with mixtures of animal species exist in North America. Because the animal species in these graveyards are not species that would normally hang out together. You know, I'm not enough of a zoologist to give concrete examples, but I would imagine that, say, predators and prey would not be hanging out together very often. You know, you got your mountain lions and your, whatever the heck mountain lions eat, your wild cattle or whatever, you know, they would not be hanging out together in a fossil graveyard, or hanging out together to be buried in a fossil graveyard. And they were clearly trying to escape some kind of cataclysm. And the fact that fossils tend to be found in high concentrations like that indicates that the creatures in these fossil graveyards died quickly and violently because of that variety. And it also does kind of help to explain the different layerings, because there is a tendency for simpler organisms to be found at lower levels, you know. So the evolutionists would say, oh yeah, that's because the fish evolved first. You know, the fish came first in the geologic timeline, and then they evolved into reptiles and stuff. But I would say the fish are lowest because, well, they were at the bottom. They didn't need to go for high ground. And then you find, you find your lizards and stuff that aren't very fast at higher elevations, and the highest elevations would be where the people got to. You know, most of the animals that were stranded on this island probably died there. But the people might have known, you know, if a single person knows that there's a higher elevation 100 miles that way, then he could lead an entire tribe to 100 miles that way. And thus the people would not be buried in the same place as the animals. And this is, to my knowledge, the prevailing explanation for why the fossil record does tend to have simpler animals at lower levels. It was really just a matter of how fast can you outrun the rising floodwater. And then, yeah, I mean, coal beds. So I was taught in school, I don't know if they still teach this, but I was taught that coal beds were formed over millions of years. And that's just not even remotely true. I mean, even nowadays, you can make coal in a laboratory under controlled settings. It is not something that takes millions of years to happen. But it does take a great deal of heat and pressure, which you might have if, say, the world is being overrun by a volcanic flood. So yeah, that's the flood. Basically, there are so many geologic features that are supposedly millions of years old, and the flood kind of explains all of them. The flood is how these structures can exist, including coal beds, fossil graveyards, rock formations, rock layers, so many things. And since we like to study the present even more than the past, this box about Mount St. Helens is really telling. Let me stop and remind you guys that you don't often hear about when we got something wrong, just like in any academic thing. Like I remember hearing that in ancient times, people thought that when you fired an arrow, that there was some kind of wind that got behind the arrow, and that was what pushed it forward. And it was really revolutionary when Isaac Newton described motion as something where an object in motion stays in motion until it is acted upon by other forces. So basically, if you shoot an arrow, the arrow keeps going because nothing makes it stop. And it keeps going until something makes it stop. You have gravity pulling it toward the planet, you have air resistance slowing it down, and you have the dirt or the rock or the flesh of the person, whatever it is that stops the arrow, gives it the force that it requires it to stop. So in physics classes nowadays, we learn Newton's 3 laws. We don't learn about the wind that pushes the arrow because that's wrong, even though people believed it for a long time. And that's fine because, knowledge is progress and all that stuff. But this thing with Mount St. Helens is building on an idea that was wrong, and I think people still believe it for the most part, but I think over time they're going to stop believing it because this. Let me just read it here and then I'll explain it. I'm sorry I'm all over the place on this. The massive volcanic eruption in 1980 changed the rules about sedimentary deposits. In the minutes following the eruption, layers were deposited in a way that was previously thought to have taken millions of years. So let me draw Mount St. Helens because that's fun. Mount St. Helens is a volcano, but it wasn't an active volcano until it was in 1980. At the beginning, it was just kind of a giant mountain. Oh, don't fail me now, marker. I got a new green, yeah. And on this mountain, it looks something like this. I'm drawing it like this because I want to put a lake here, because that's important. You got a lake, and you got some trees. This is all important, I promise. Trees, there's some trees. I don't know. They're probably pine, right? Something like Washington. So sure, pine trees. There we go. And Mount St. Helens looked like this in 1979. And then, I don't remember the exact date, but in 1980, Mount St. Helens blew. It had a ton of built-up pressure down here from, God only knows, the lava and, however this all works. There was just a ton of built-up pressure, and eventually it was too much, and it just exploded. One whole side of the mountain just blasted away, and it was like a freaking fire hose of smoke and lava and everything. Where's my black? Yeah, maybe get that ash up in here. And so it was a really dramatic volcanic eruption, and very unusual also. And it gave us some insight on what a large-scale cataclysm, which is a fancy word for massive disaster, what a large-scale cataclysm can do to the land. So what ends up happening here is that tumbling down the side of this mountain is just this huge pile of incredibly hot ash and probably some lava. And wouldn't you know it, but it takes these trees and part of it hit a lake. There was a big old lake in the mountain, and it just went in, and of course now you've got red hot mud. It's not red hot, but really, really hot, superheated mud mixed with water and ash and all that tumbling down the mountain. It was quite dramatic. And then, I'm going to erase this picture. I think you get how things run away from floods. After the eruption was over, what we were left with was probably not much blue. We still have our mountain, which probably wasn't very green either, but I'm going to go ahead and and leave it green for consistency. We have this mountain, and in the midst of the landscape, let's kind of make a 3D mountain here. In the midst of the landscape, there was a deep canyon, which makes sense, right? Probably from about where that lake was, there was a channel cut through the ground where you could, it was deep. It was actually about a quarter of the size of the Grand Canyon. To my knowledge, it's still there. I can't imagine they filled it in, but it's not quite the tourist attraction that the Grand Canyon is. But inside of this canyon looked almost exactly like the Grand Canyon did. And the Grand Canyon, as we all know, was carved by that tiny little river at the very bottom of the canyon over the course of millions of years, right? Because we measured the rate at which it carves through the rock, and we worked backwards and assumed that it was a flat rock. You see the uniformitarian philosophy, but this eruption, this small-scale cataclysm, I say small scale because it wasn't, the whole world. This is one volcano, was able to carve a canyon that was a fourth the size of the Grand Canyon. So if you just imagine something 4 times as big as Mount St. Helens, you would get a Grand Canyon. And one of the interesting things in the Grand Canyon is that there are tree fossils. If you look, I'm going to take a cutaway view into the, where's my black? Into the side of the canyon here. And if you were to look at the rock layers, you would see layers, and of course, longer geologists would say that these layers took millions of years to form each. But then right in the middle of these rock layers is a tree fossil. It's a fossilized tree. It's, I don't know, maybe got some branches on it. I don't know what they look like exactly. But the important thing is that the tree fossil is cutting through this millions of years old layer, which is impossible. Because if the layer is millions of years old, then the tree would have died before it got buried. You know what I mean? What is this, a million, 50 million year old tree? Because it cuts through 50 million year layers. But in the Grand Canyon, they have fossils like this, and scientists aren't really sure what to do about them. But in the Mount St. Helens Canyon, these exact same fossils appeared, and they were tree fossils that were stuck into the side through multiple rock layers. They might look familiar because they're the same trees that were over here. The trees were ripped from the ground and carried down through the lava flow and got stuck into the side of the canyon that was cut by the lava flow. And when all the dust settled, you have a tree sticking through multiple layers of rock that had been deposited by this eruption. So yeah, the Mount St. Helens eruption gave us a really precious look at how something like the Grand Canyon, which previously was thought to have taken millions of years to form, can actually form in a matter of days or weeks. Because that was a doozy. Any questions on that? Okay, that's a pretty cool one. Climate change, next one. This isn't the modern climate change, but recent Antarctic expeditions have discovered fossilized remains of a thick forest that once covered much of the continent, indicating that the climate was once very different there from its present frozen condition. Some of these items, I feel like they don't really count because the evolutionists have an answer. Their answer is that millions of years ago, it was a big forest, and then, over millions of years, the tectonic plates moved around, and now it's at the South Pole. But regardless, we are all in agreement, at least, both long-agers and creationists, that Antarctica was once a very different place, and probably in a very different place. And then we've already talked about fault lines and plate tectonics there, the last box on that page. That was all those pictures that I drew last time that are still kind of there. Okay, let's turn to the next page. This is the end of the Noah's Ark segment. Ark implications. We gotta bring it back to Jesus, right? In the liturgy for holy baptism, you find a flood prayer written by Martin Luther. And the prayer opens with these lines: Almighty and eternal God, according to your strict judgment, you condemned the unbelieving world through the flood. Yet according to your great mercy, you preserved believing Noah and his family, 8 souls in all. So how does that prayer connect the flood accounts to holy baptism? There's water, right?
Yeah.
That's an easy one. What did the water do?
Wash away sinners.
Wash everything away.
I hear washing away, yes. So Noah's flood washed away sinners, of course. You know, we talk about the geologic and archaeologic evidences and whatever, but the fact remains that Noah's flood, first and foremost, was the judgment of God against sin. There was a world that had become entirely corrupt, and it was only a matter of time before Noah was killed or corrupted as well, and then there'd be nobody left. So God literally waited until there was exactly one righteous family, and then he said, all right, guys, you're it. I'm going to rescue you and purge the rest of the world in a flood. The flood represents God's wrath, but it also represents God's protection of Noah. You know, God protected Noah from the evil of the world around him by literally washing it away. But the Bible, that's kind of my own thoughts about that, but the Bible actually speaks of the ark as similar to baptism. In the New Testament, baptism is like the ark in which Noah and his family were preserved from the judgment of God. So when the judgment of God comes on the world once again, it is your baptism that you can cling to, that binds you to Christ and allows you to survive when the rest of the world perishes. So yeah, the church is like an ark because of baptism. And then a reading from 2 Peter 3. For they deliberately overlook this fact, that the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water, and through water by the word of God, and that by means of these the world that then existed was deluged with water and perished. A deluge is a gigantic flood. But by the same word, the heavens and earth that now exist are stored up for fire, being kept until the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. So the Bible speaks of a future day of judgment involving fire rather than water. That will be like the judgment in Noah's day. That's the judgment at the end of time when Christ returns to judge the living and the dead. We don't know if there's going to be literal fire, but the Bible speaks of it often enough that you might as well assume it. But I know a lot of people have thought and probably still think that the judgment by fire might come from a nuclear war or something like that. But whether God uses people to do it or whether God does it supernaturally is hardly the point. There will be a day of judgment, and only those in the ark of the church by faith in Jesus Christ will be saved from it. So, yeah, there's that connection. And that is the end of that lesson, and also kind of the end of the sciencey part of this course. So if you want to learn more science, I would very much encourage you to use that daily devotion book. Even if you don't go back and read January 1st and 2nd and 3rd or whatever, you know, don't be a completionist. Don't ruin your run for the year just because you missed too many days and you don't want to reread all that stuff. Just pick it up and start at the day where you are. Most of them aren't really meant to connect together. The penguin one I found is actually for January 5th and 6th, I think. And that just happens to be 2 pages, both about penguins. So they were able to use the same penguin picture on both pages. But most of them are not related to each other, so don't kick yourself if you miss a day or anything like that. Just, if you've never done daily devotions before, I would encourage you to start with prayer. Tell God that you're here and you're listening, and ask Him to come and speak to you. And then you read the little page, and then at the end there's a Bible verse. It's usually from Psalms, but not always. And you can, if you really want to mix it up, you can even read the verse out loud. There's something different about hearing something read, even when you're the one reading it. So I'd encourage you to do that. And the whole process would probably take 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. So, if you could work that into your morning or evening routine, I think you would be a much stronger Christian for it. There's my spiel for you. Let's play Stump the Pastor for 20 minutes. Does anyone have any good questions they'd like to ask me?
On top of my head.
I warned you. I gave you some time, so you should be able to dig a little deeper than the top of your head by now. I literally have nothing prepared right now, so you gotta give me something to talk about. Any questions you've just been dying to ask?
How's your day been going?
David, has that just been eating a hole in your soul all day long? Pretty good for a Wednesday.
Great.
I've started a New Year's resolution to get my life more organized. I've often valued flexibility and being able to just do anything that's needed of me in the moment, but I find that what ends up happening is that I get this kind of dark cloud looming over my head of all of the things that I know I should be doing, but I'm not doing. And when I have free time, I can't think of any one thing in the dark cloud to get done. So I'm trying this year to really highly schedule my time very rigidly, and I won't be as flexible, but I'm hoping I'll be more productive, and maybe then the dark cloud will go away. And I will actually do the laundry list of things that needs doing, but there's no deadline for it. That's the problem. I need deadlines. If I don't have to get it done by Sunday, then I'm not gonna get it done by Sunday. And that applies to every Sunday forever. But yeah, so day's going pretty good. Okay, any tougher ones? That's a hard question. I really had to reach way back into my schooling to answer that. Alright, if you don't ask anything, I'm going to talk about nuclear radio halos. Do you want to hear about nuclear radio halos?
Sure. What happened last Sunday? Because I wasn't able to make the service.
Wasn't it talk about family or something?
Yeah, so was that?
Jesus.
Jesus is my brother, that's right. Yeah, I talked about adoption. I talked about how we have been adopted into God's family by faith in Jesus. And just as adopted children are no different than natural born children, begotten children is the word I use, the word the Bible uses, I just borrowed it. Adopted children have no legal distinction from begotten children. They're all members of the family and heirs of what the family owns. And so also, Jesus is God's only begotten son, but we are all begotten sons and daughters, or we are all adopted sons and daughters of God. And just as legally there's no distinction, so also with us, we are heirs of eternal life. We are co-owners of the same treasures of heaven that Jesus himself claims.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So after Adam and Eve got kicked out of the Garden, then after that, how long does the Bible say how many years after that when Noah's flood happened?
It does, actually, right down to the year. Go ahead and open your Bible to Genesis chapter 5. In your Faith Alive Bible, that's going to be page 21. I actually worked out the math on this once and then found out that I did it wrong. So, my addition errors aside, we can actually do this. So this is one of the really boring parts of the Bible that is just like, oh my gosh, it's just a list of names and years. Why is this even in here? And then you find out, oh, it's actually incredibly valuable for, learning history. So let's go ahead and start with Adam. Adam's the first guy. And I'll just read Genesis 5, beginning at verse 1. This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female he created them, and he blessed them and named them man when they were created. When Adam had lived 130 years, so I'm gonna do this. I'm just going to write 130 here. When Adam lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his image, and named him Seth. Now, do you think Adam had other kids in that 130 years? Yeah, he did. But Seth is the only one that we care about. What this chapter is doing, even though it doesn't tell you, is it's drawing a family connection from Adam to Noah. So at the end of this line, somewhere over here, we're going to find Noah. But we're just along for the ride now. So Adam had Seth when he was 130 years old. Named him Seth. Verse 4. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years. I'm going to try to draw this to scale. I think I've already screwed up though, but that's okay. 800 years here. Put it on this side so it's consistent. 800 years. Thus, all the days that Adam lived were 930 years. He had other sons and daughters. Verse 5. Thus, all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. There we go. Then verse 6. When Seth had lived 105 years, 105. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Yeah, I'm writing smaller. I realize that I need to do that. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years. So we'll do something like that. I don't know, 807, sure. 807 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. So, I mean, you can see what I'm doing here. We got Kenan, and so I'll spare you the whole thing in the interest of others. But I mean, it's really precise. Enosh lived after he fathered Kenan 815 years and other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he had Mahalalel. There we go. Mahalalel. I don't know. I feel like I'm spelling banana. B-A-N-A-N-A-N-A-N-A. Like you just don't know when to stop. Mahalalel. Yeah, that's what it says. There's 3 L's in there. And let's jump ahead. Mahalalel lived 65 years when he fathered Jared. That's a refreshingly English name, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then when Jared lived 162 years, so that's a bit of a doozy there, he fathered Enoch. Enoch is a special case. I'll get to him in just a second here. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. Selah. I always get that mixed up. You know, all the times that I write Methuselah. Enoch is a special case. I'm down at verse 22. Enoch walked with God after he fathered Methuselah 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. There are 2 people in the Bible who never die. One of them is Enoch. Anyone know the other one? Elijah. Very good.
Just gonna get that.
Weren't quick enough to the buzzer. Yes, Elijah was famously taken up by God in a whirlwind and thus never died. But Enoch, if we interpret this correctly, never died.
Did it in the Bible say he walked with God?
Yeah, we just read that. He walked with God. Well, I would take that to mean that he was a very faithful man. So, you know, God doesn't just grant anybody a free trip to heaven without dying first. You have to be pretty special. So Enoch walked with God for 300 years after having Methuselah, and then he was not, for God took him. Methuselah lived 187 years. Oops, let's get this stuff in order here. And then he had Lamech. Methuselah is famous for being the oldest person in recorded history. Verse 27, all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. Depending on how you reckon the years, Methuselah died suspiciously close to the day of Noah's flood. You know, that there's rounding errors in the years, so it's always plus or minus a few months. The little chart that we have outside the bathrooms here has Methuselah dying the year before the flood. But if you do the math right, or if you do the math, I'm not saying it's right, but there is a way to do the math where Methuselah dies in the same year that the flood happened, which would be crazy to think about, that the oldest man in recorded history did not die of old age. He died because there was a worldwide flood that killed everybody. So, like, would he have lived 1,000 years? Did he have broken the big 4 digits there? I don't know.
Does it say in the Bible that he was a faithful?
It doesn't. So I've heard some people say that it's a major theme in the Bible that that faithful children come from faithful parents, and since Noah was faithful, we kind of want to believe that all of these people were faithful. Certainly Enoch was extremely faithful, but we also know that it only takes one generation to screw up. And I mean, you know, even if Methuselah was faithful for this part of his life, what about this part of his life? You know, anything can happen. So the fact is, we don't know. The Bible doesn't mention Methuselah anywhere else. He's literally a name on a list.
Oh.
But if you add up the years, Elliot, you had your hand up.
Yes. So did that mean Methuselah was unfaithful then?
If
he would have died,
if he died in the
or
flood,
unrighteous.
yeah, if Methuselah died in the flood, then it would mean that he was numbered among the unrighteous. Otherwise, God would have brought him on the ark. So that's the thing, yeah, is if Methuselah died in the flood, it means he was unrighteous. So a lot of people like to think Methuselah died like right before the flood. Maybe even God waited until Methuselah died to send the flood. I mean, God doesn't have to wait for anybody. If God wants somebody to die, then he'll die.
What if he was
God
righteous?
didn't even wait for Enoch to die. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that you can speculate on with numbers. Let me see here. Lamech had Noah at 182 years. I think that's right. I think Lamech is Noah's father. Yeah. And so then out comes Noah here at the end. So anyway, if you want to add up all these numbers, you will get the number of years from Adam to Noah. And then it's worth knowing that Noah was actually 600 years old when the flood happened.
I thought it was like 560.
460.
Nope, it is
562.
where is he? Chapter 7, verse 6. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came upon the earth.
627.
What was that?
Is that 187 or 189 under Methuselah?
187. Sorry.
187, so 629.
Another part of my New Year's resolution is I'm going to read through the Bible in a year, because I haven't done that in a long time. And I just happened to read this genealogy this morning, so it is fresh in my mind that Noah was 600 years old when the flood happened.
I'm pretty sure it's 760.
Holy crap!
I wasn't done yet.
Oh wait, keep going.
I'm pretty sure it's something like 1500.
Keep going.
No.
You might have forgotten to add the 600 here.
Oh no, trust me, I'm getting there. Just there's a little pestering person right there.
That's what you get for taking my question. I was
You
gonna
bunch of
answer.
nerds. I give you a
Guys,
math,
can you move your head for a second?
give you a math problem and you just gotta
You're
solve
good.
it.
You're good now. Okay, so
Sorry about the
no, you're good.
Do that, honey.
308, 216.
She's doing it.
a lot.
Oh, she's got a calculator.
You
Yeah.
got like
A lot of years.
You know, my generation was told that
I've
we
got
would
like
not have a calculator in our pocket, so
1398-ish.
we better learn this stuff.
I've got like 1398, 1400-ish
Well,
after
I
Noah.
kind of did not check out, so.
I may have forgot to carry the
Is
one
that-
couple times.
Wait, never mind.
This is a 7, if we're really doing this. I just kind of wanted to show you.
I think I forgot to carry a couple ones.
1,
Yeah.
6, 5, 6.
So, yeah, it's a little over
I'm
1,500 years.
smarter.
That's what I figured. But anyway, the answers are written for you
I
on
got
the
the answer right.
on the poster
Exact.
outside the bathroom, so feel free to have a gander at
You have
that.
to use a
There is
cheating
a
device.
ton of information on that poster, and I can't vouch for all of it, but I just like that it actually presents human history on a biblical timescale. So even if it gets a little wonky, especially in the more modern times, it's still a pretty cool poster. And it was free, which is the best kind of
Ooh,
poster.
where is it? Who gave it to you
It's
for free?
outside the bathrooms. Tom Beeson did, actually.
Tom Beeson.
He sits in the back of church almost every Sunday near the sound booth.
Oh,
He's a single guy.
Oh,
like
I know
60,
how-
give or take.
How
Yeah.
did I not know who that was?
oh wait.
Yeah, so he told me somebody gave it to him like 10 years ago.
Not so much. Oh, okay.
Wasn't that long ago. There's some more recent events than that up on it, but in any case.
Yeah, I forgot to carry a couple of those.
We're not done though. We still got like 7 minutes. Anyone else have any burning questions?
I don't know,
When does
that one
Revelations
was like,
take place?
At the end.
Yeah, but like, isn't Revelations like a giant confusing chapter of the Bible?
Well, it's a whole book of the Bible. Revelation is a vision that was given to John. We're pretty sure it's the same John that was Jesus' disciple. He had been exiled to an island called Patmos, which is somewhere on Greece. If you ever go there you will know that there are no trees on it. It's a very rocky, forsaken island, and he was exiled there for his faith. And while he was praying, God gave him a vision, and Revelation is that vision. I'll go ahead and explain Revelation since you asked. A lot of people get some really weird interpretations of Revelation because they think the vision is chronological. People think that, so there's, we have the start, and we get these 7, I forget what they are now.
I'm stumping the pastor, yes.
Yep, you are, very good. Here, I'll just look it up in my Bible, I got it right here. So he has this vision, and in this vision there's an angel, there's a lot of 7s. There's a lot of numbers in Revelation. Oh yeah, the seals, that's what it is. So he sees the scroll that has 7 seals on it. So a scroll might look something like this. I'm being way too precise. And here is the where the paper ends. But a scroll would normally have a seal on it, where the sender would melt wax onto the scroll to keep it shut, and then he would put his seal on it. He would stamp it, and whatever his personal family seal was would go on the scroll. It was actually usually a ring, a signet ring. And that way the recipient would know that this scroll was sent by the holder of that ring, and it was not read by anybody else. But this scroll has 7 seals on it. So it's crazy how many seals are on it. And every time one of the seals is broken, something crazy happens.
What?
And then when the 7th seal is broken, an angel appears. I think he's the one holding, there are 7 trumpets, that's what it is. So there's 7 trumpets that need to be blown. And every time a trumpet is blown, something crazy happens. But when the 7th trumpet is blown, then something else happens. Where are you gonna
I guess, is it the 7 of something else?
It is, yes, very good.
Wow, you're so smart.
Yeah, I forget, the bowls, that's
Thank
the
you.
7 bowls, there we go.
Okay.
So what is this other 7? Yeah, there's all kinds of 7s. I think the 7 bowls are the next big ones. So then, so the 7th seal, when the 7th seal is broken, it introduces the 7 trumpets. When the 7th trumpet is blown, a bunch of stuff happens, and then the 7 bowls appear. And when the 7th bowl is poured out, there's the end.
You're telling
So
me
some people-
3 crazy things happen.
Yeah, some people read this, and these people are wrong. They read it chronologically, where this happens, and this represents a bunch of historical events that haven't happened yet, and then this represents a bunch of other historic events, and then this one represents a bunch of other historic events, and then we got the end. And so they are trying to make all kinds of sense of all kinds of really crazy stuff, when really it should be more like this. You've got your 7 seals, and then when the 7th seal is opened, it retells the same events differently. And that's the 7 trumpets. And then when the 7th trumpet is blown, it kind of resets and retells the same account from before. The 7 bowls. And then you have the end. And when you recognize it like this, when you read it like this, you realize that most of this stuff has already happened. A lot of the tribulation, the specific events in Revelation, refer to the persecution of the early church. We talk about all the liberals and taking over the country or whatever. We have no idea what real persecution is. Christians were systematically hunted down. They were burned for light in Caesar's garden. They were forced to fight each other in gladiatorial arenas to the death, or fight animals, or do all kinds of bizarre things. There were mass crucifixions. It was bad. And a lot of the really, really bad stuff in Revelation is depicting that stuff, which pretty much ended overnight when Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity in the early 4th century. And after that, suddenly Christianity went from being hunted and stigmatized to being the official religion of the Empire of Rome, the most powerful nation in the world. And so all that to say, we are still living in the time of tribulation, but a lot of the specific stuff in Revelation has already happened. And what remains to happen is something that we're not going to understand until after it's happened. Just like most of the Old Testament prophecies about Jesus were not understood until after they happened, and you look back and you'd be like, oh wow, Psalm 22 was about Jesus' crucifixion. Who knew? Things like that. So that's how it's going to be for Revelation, I think. Is we're not really going to, Revelation is not meant to be a warning where you have to look for specific signs, and then you'll know the end is coming. Revelation is meant to assure you that no matter what happens, God is in control, He is the author of history, and in the end, the Lamb of God is victorious. And that's what we find at the end of Revelation. Cool, and that's my spiel on Revelation in 6 minutes. That has brought us to the end of our time together. Next time we're going to finish up this unit with lesson 18. Is the God of the Old Testament the same as the God of the New Testament?